Well, hi gang, it's your uncle here, and I want to thank you for sending me those nice pictures of, of the eagle and the young grizzly bear and you guys camping up in the north up there. I sure appreciate that, and I'm kind of sad that I can't be there to enjoy that with you. But I thought I would tell you, a little story. And, your father, the legend, he can attest to the fact that this story is not a tall tale or anything like that. It is the honest to goodness truth. And as a matter of fact, so can all the people that worked on the white cab company in the north that year. And the year was 1991. And I had the privilege of driving a beautiful white Lincoln Continental cab, which had like a sunroof, and it had electric reclining seats and windows and all kinds of electric stuff like that. It was just a beautiful cab to drive in, and I got to drive it around the north all year long. But this story is about Christmas, and it was the 24th, which everybody knows is Christmas Eve. And here I was sitting in my Lincoln Continental. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. All the people were going home and drinking their eggnog, and there was a few buses still coming in, but hardly any. And I was sitting at 103. Now, I guess you all know that the stands of the taxis have a code number. Each of them has a separate number, and 103 happens to be the Greyhound bus station in the north. So, I'm sitting there and I'm wondering how I'm going to make a few dollars on a day when nobody's going anywhere and everybody's staying home. And you could hear the radios, you can hear what all the other guys, all the other cab drivers are doing. You're linked up to them, and you're kind of in touch with everything that's happening in the city. If the president comes in and visits the aquatic center or whatever, there's usually a cab driver there looking for a fare, right? And it's like that all over the city. Cabbies just know what's going on, and they're all over. But on Christmas Eve, it's unfortunately very slow, and you don't make a lot of money. So I was sitting at 103 when this elderly man came up to me. Well, it was a little bit of a beard, a little more than what I'm wearing right now. Sorry about that. And he knocked on my window, and zzz, down it goes. And he looked down at me and he says, "Tell me, my man, how much would it cost to go to Vernon?" And I said, "Oh, well, yeah," I said, "Yeah, right, he's going to go to Vernon." First of all, he didn't look like he could even afford a good pair of pants or something like that. But anyway, I thought I'd humor him, and I opened the glove compartment and pulled out a list of out-of-town places and how expensive they were to drive to. But Vernon wasn't on there, so I had to radio the dispatch, and I asked her. And he was waiting there, and he looked a little bit impatient, but... And then she came back. Of course, there's another part of this story, too, which is when you call into the dispatch and you say, 57, what's the fare to Vernon? You hear all these little other taxi cab drivers' ears going up and going, "What? A fare to Vernon? On Christmas Eve?" So I can, hear all these other guys listening in the background, and I'm thinking, he's not going anywhere. And she radioed back. It was around $700. So, and I told him that, and he looked at me and was a little skeptical, and he said, "Well, listen, son, I'm in a real hurry to get down there. I have to meet some people down there, and there's a whole load of stuff coming down there for me. If I don't get there, many people are going to be disappointed. But all I have is $500. And he just smacked that on my dashboard, and he says, "What do you say? Do I have a deal?" And I'm like, okay. Welcome to my taxi. you know, and opened the door, and fine, you know. I thought, whoa, wait a minute. 40% of $500, you're still making a good amount of money. Well, it's a lot of driving time, but still you're going to make maybe $40 maximum sitting around here on Christmas Eve. So, we said hello to each other, and I had the pleasure of radioing in 57. I'm on my way to Vernon. Well, you know, you can imagine all these guys, what? He's going to Vernon? Oh, no! You know, jealousy, jealousy. And, yeah, I was on my way to Vernon with this quiet old man. He was quite a quiet old guy. I don't want to talk that much. But, you know, you chat back and forth about this and that. I wasn't listening to him that seriously, to tell you the truth. Yeah, he was telling me something about, you know, this deal that he had, and he had to get down there. It had to be tonight, and you know, there's expecting a big shipment and so on. And I thought, well, yeah, okay, well, fine, you know, we'll get to that. I said, oh, this cab will take you there. It's just like being on a boat, you know. A white Lincoln Continental is like, I don't know, it's like driving a Panzer with shocks on it. It's just like, it's beautiful. You just glide down the highway. It was an incredible drive because as it got darker and as we headed south, you go through all these small towns, and you know, there's farms along the way all lit up with colorful Christmas lights, and people have their decorations out. So it was like really pleasant to be going south with this elderly man. Somewhere along the line, you know, we got hungry, and he said, well, I'll stop over there at the diner, and you know, he bought me a burger. And, yeah, we got to know each other a little bit, but there was not really a lot to say. He seemed like, you know, he was intent on doing something else. He had some other thing going on in his mind, and he was quite quiet most of the time. Well, to make a long story short, after all, it is a long drive to Vernon from the north. It's like driving from Moscow to Paris, you know? And it takes about, I don't know, what does it take? 10, 12 hours. I think somewhere around there, 10 hours I think it was. And I can remember we got into Vernon at about, I think about 11 o'clock at night. Now this old guy, he wanted to go into this district which was a little bit like kind of out of town a little bit, and there were some cheap hotels there and everything. He said, well, pull over at this one, he said, you know. And so parked the cab, and we went in there, and he only had like a small suitcase or something. But he gave me another 20 bucks, and he says, well, you know, that's for the great ride, and you got me here and everything like that. And he just disappeared up a stairwell, you know. He didn't bother to register or nothing like that. It's like he knew his way around there. I don't know. Anyway, I went into a little bar. There was a cutesy little bar down there, and people were in the best Christmas mood, you know. They were just really in a great Christmas spirit. They were all immediately very friendly to me, and we chatted, you know, we sat around, chatted, had a few drinks, and this one lady had, she had a couple of, you know, these weasel things. They were running around the bar, you know, they were running around her shoulder and everything. That was really cool. And so, okay, so, you know, like I say, I had to go back. I had to get started back on the same night, right? Because I couldn't overnight there. So I said, you know, I said Merry Christmas to everyone, and it's just been great meeting you all, and bang, back into the cab I was going to go. And I look back up at the hotel there, and I see the old guy standing way up on top on a balcony, and he's dressed like in a Santa Claus suit, and he's looking up at the sky, he's looking around for something. Like he's waiting for a plane or something, or a helicopter, you know, I don't know. Anyway, that's the last I ever saw of the guy. I got in my cab, my beautiful white Lincoln Continental. Incidentally, it was converted to propane, so it was cheap to drive, right? For a big car. And headed back north. The problem was I was extremely tired. I'd been driving for maybe about 14, 15 hours. So somewhere along the way, I decided, no, you can't do this anymore. You got to go to sleep. So pulled it over to a little pull out on the side. And I'll put back the reclining seats and snoozed. I wasn't going to snooze very long. It was about 6, 7 in the morning when I woke up again and turned the key. By the way, I was in the middle of nowhere. You know, there was no towns within, I don't know, 40 kilometers maybe? 40 miles? Does that say anything to you? And nothing happened. The cab wouldn't start. So I go, geez, what could that be, right? You know, so I got a leak in the gas tank. It was over half full on the way back. And, it was something different. On the front of the cab, under the dashboard, beside the steering wheel, there was a toggle switch which put it on reserve tank, right? Somewhere in the night, I pushed my knee against that toggle switch and put it on reserve, which was empty. Yeah, so anyway, I figured that out, and wham! Away I went. You know, I didn't hear any complaints that year about kids that didn't get their Christmas presents. I myself had some really cool things happen to me on the way back, and they were my presents. Aside from the fact that I was earning the 40% off the $500, right? You probably know the town of Williams Lake. Well, on the way through Williams Lake, I could hear the other cab drivers, which were driving in Williams Lake, on my radio. And I thought, oh, we'll wish them a Merry Christmas. I said, hey, this is 57. I'm on my way back from Vernon to the north. Merry Christmas, everybody. And I had like 10 guys, what are you doing over here? You know, what are you doing down here? Merry Christmas. Oh. So that was like, that was heartwarming somehow. I don't know why. But it was really cool to just talk to an entirely different cab company in an entirely different city, right? So that was cool. Now, the other thing is, these radios, they have a radius of maybe, I don't know, 50, 40, 30, somewhere around there, miles, eh? And if you're outside that range, they can't hear you. The dispatch can't hear you. Nobody can hear you. But I didn't know exactly where I was going to get in a radio contact again. And so when I was almost back in the north, just on the boundaries of it, I could start hearing the cabbies talking to each other again in the dispatch. And, you know, a lot of people have wished me Merry Christmas in my life, I guess. But there was something special about that when I got back into radio range, you know, I could hear the dispatch, and when you get back into a city range, you have to report in, and I said, 57, I'm back in the north. And the sweetest thing I ever heard was the dispatch saying to me, 57, you're 1 in 1. Welcome back. Merry Christmas. I was like, hey, welcome back to the gang. And you know, anybody that drove for the white cabs that year can attest to the fact that this is the truth. Because they know that on Christmas Eve, 1991, I drove Santa Claus to Vernon. And the next day, the yellow cabs all said, hey, 57 drove Santa Claus to Vernon. Now, if this ain't the solid truth, you ask your father, the legend, and he will testify to the fact that I drove Santa Claus to to Vernon. After all, if you think about it, what did they build a Lincoln Continental for, except for such occasions? Merry Christmas, all.